What's up, guys? Welcome back to another daily Bible reading snapshot. Today we're looking at Psalm 19, 20, and 21 here in our Old Testament reading. And what we see in Psalm 19 is an important chapter about God's revelation. Now, it's a big word, but what it means is how God reveals himself. And there's two main ways that God reveals himself that we see laid out here. The first one in verses 1 to 6 is how God reveals himself in nature, how he reveals himself in the created world. That is called general revelation. Moving on to verse 7 talks about how God reveals himself in his word. That is talking about, the technical term is special revelation. So God has revealed himself. What should our response to that be? Well, verses 12 to 14. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Now, what's the point? Basically, if you recognize that God has revealed himself in so many ways, we want our hearts to reflect that back to God. We want our hearts to be all about what God has revealed. So there are ways that we can praise God by looking at the world. When we see the world and the things that God has made, that should push us to praise God. When we read his word, that should drive us to praise God for his good words. And what we see here is a description of what the law of God does, what his word does. It says it's perfect. It revives our souls. It's sure, and it makes wise the simple. And a bunch of other things you're going to read today about the Bible. And I just want you to see when the Bible speaks highly of the Bible, that's something that we need to take to heart seriously here in chapter 19. So in Psalm 20 and 21, we see two different instances of God saving and David reminding himself and reminding others that God saves his people. In particular, in chapter 20, he says, I know, this is verse 6, I know that the Lord saves his anointed. Talking about his people in more specific sense, he saves David. David says, I know that God continues to deliver me from these problems because I'm his anointed one. I know he saves me. But the problem is some trust in chariots. Some trust in horses to win battles. But we, all of us Israelites, is what he's saying. We need to trust in the name of the Lord our God. That's where our trust needs to be. While the world trusts a bunch of different things, just like today, the world trusts their popularity, their success, their money, or whatever, their families, to have purpose in life and to be saved from any problems. They trust all those things. This text should remind us we need to trust in the name of the Lord our God. Now, chapter 21, this other song talks about how the king trusts in the Lord. That's why I want you to see these two connected. There's a lot of similarities here between Psalm 20 and 21, because this says, the king trusts in the Lord, and through the steadfast love of the Most High, he shall not be moved. Talking about his own experience as king. I know, David says, I will not be moved because I trust in the steadfast love of the Lord. That needs to be something that pushes us too. When we see the trust of David here, we want to trust in the Lord. Just like some people trust in chariots and horses, us, Christians, we need to trust in the name of the Lord at all times. So meditate on that reading today, especially Psalm 19, 20, and 21 here in our Old Testament. So much good for us to learn. In the New Testament, we are looking at the back half of Acts 19, and this is all about what's going on in the city of Ephesus. Now, we already talked about Ephesus before. They're continuing to do ministry in Ephesus, and when that happens, they have a riot on their hands. The problem is a guy named Demetrius who makes the idols. He's a silversmith. He makes the idols, and he recognizes, just like the slave owners in Philippi recognize, that this church and Paul's preaching is not good for their business. He recognizes that Paul preaching about the fact that there's no real idols, they're not really gods, that is going to mess up their business plan. Because it's going to mess up their business plan, he takes matters into his own hands, starts a riot against Paul and Silas and all the other Christians. And what happens here, he says two things. And it's a little complicated because it's not just one thing. He says, we're going to lose our business, but also the thing he presents to the public is they're going to turn us away from the great goddess named Artemis. And there was a big temple in the city of Ephesus to Artemis that people worshipped at. And this guy Demetrius says, they're turning us away from our gods. Don't let them turn us away from their gods. So because of that, they get these people together and start a riot. But it's interesting because the Romans actually in this text here, it says the town clerk, in fact, not the Romans, but the town clerk, he says, look, we are going to get in trouble with the Romans. Town clerk says, we need to stop this riot because the Romans could come in and shut us down, and that would be really bad. So let's cool down a little bit and not riot here. So it's interesting that God uses this town clerk and his fear of the Romans to stop this riot against these Christians. So as you could imagine, if you were a Christian in this town where there's this big riot against you, there'd be a lot of pressure. That would not be the easiest thing. And same thing is true today when there's a lot of pressure on Christians in a particular area. Maybe there's pressure on Christians where you live, and I know there is more and more here in America, but the reality is wherever we are, the more the world gets dark, the more the world gets evil, the more Christians are going to be pushed to the sides, the more Christians are actually going to be persecuted. So what we need to recognize is, just as the early church had to stand strong through these slanderous accusations and these persecutions, we need to stand strong today. And obviously, as we stand strong, we need to do what the Psalms talk about that we read. Some trust in chariots, some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. That is what's going to get us through any of those hard times. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you back tomorrow from the Daily Bible Reading Snapshot.